We dated for 7 years and were married for 4. In the end, Daniel was unfaithful to me. He couldn't resist the fresh allure of a younger woman, the look of near worship she gave him. The day I discovered his betrayal, I sat perfectly still by the window from dusk until the sun came up again, not moving an inch. And then I decided to get my revenge. She ruined my marriage, so I would ruin her career and her future. He betrayed my love, so I would bankrupt him and drag him down into the abyss, along with the happiness he had chosen. I would not allow anyone to live a better life than me. When Daniel came down the stairs, I had just finished checking Haley Carter's latest Instagram post from my burner account. In the photo, the young woman's face, framed by a crisp white button-down shirt and a denim miniskirt, overflowed with the vitality of youth. The caption read, "Ready for our date." Looking up, I saw him wearing exactly the same thing, a white button-down and jeans. In his mid-30s, he still possessed an undeniable masculine charm. It was obvious they had coordinated their outfits. Daniel walked over, stroked my hair affectionately, and smiled. "I'm heading out, honey." I couldn't deny that it was precisely that handsome face that had made me fall in love with him, especially when he smiled. He managed to look rugged and tender all at once. Unfortunately, his smile now only provoked a grimace of contempt in me. I returned the smile and watched him walk out the door. That would probably be our last moment of mutual kindness. Starting today, he would undoubtedly become extremely irritable. Tonight, the storm would unleash. I had been preparing for this day for half a year. A smile formed on my face, but tears streamed down my cheeks. My only desire was that no one would be happier than me. After all, it had been 11 years. I gave it my all. But 6 months ago, he betrayed me. The day I found out about Daniel's infidelity was just an ordinary day. We were having dinner as usual. We often used that time to catch up on our days. Since we were both so busy, we cherished those intimate moments. However, that day he was distracted, replying to text messages on his phone every so often with an unconscious smirk. When he replied for the 3rd time, I frowned, set down my silverware, and stared at him. "What's so interesting that you can't put your phone down?" Sensing my annoyance, he put the phone away and smiled to placate me. It's the project team, they're still working. An urgent issue came up. "Come on, let's eat, don't be mad." As he spoke, he transferred the best piece of grilled wild-caught salmon onto my plate. My favorite dish, his favorite cut. I watched him, and a strange sense of high alert washed over me. I knew him too well. That night, we had dinner, chatted, and went to bed, as usual. But he didn't know I wasn't asleep. The dead of night was terrifyingly silent. Quietly, I took his phone. We trusted each other. Though we knew each other's passcodes, we had never snooped through each other's devices. But that night, I did something I previously despised. I sat on the couch in the study and dug through his phone. There were no unknown contacts in his iMessage threads. However, there was no conversation from that evening in his project team's group chat either. I scrolled through his contacts. I was still pinned to the top, but as I scrolled down, I stopped at a contact whose profile picture was Minnie Mouse. I clicked on it, but the chat history was completely empty, not even an initial greeting. I opened his Instagram. As I looked, I prayed over and over that they hadn't done anything wrong. Her feed documented a colorful life with lots of selfies with her sorority sisters. She seemed very confident and outgoing. When she smiled, she was like a sunflower. Even I thought she was beautiful. In a post from 2 months ago, I found a profile shot of Daniel. The caption read, "Interviewing my idol. So happy. My absolute favorite Cornell alum Daniel is the best." The background was Daniel's office, but that alone didn't prove anything. The hand holding the phone trembled slightly. But I didn't lose hope. I scrolled further back. There was a group photo of the two of them. There were many people in the picture, and they were standing quite far apart. The background looked like an alumni weekend event at Cornell University. I remembered him telling me he had been invited to give a talk at his alma mater. I was on a business trip overseas and couldn't attend. I remembered how he had enthusiastically recounted anecdotes from our college days over the phone that day. Further back, there was no trace of interaction between them. Thinking about it now, that anniversary event was probably how they met. I re-examined the group photo. Some memories came into sharper focus. The day she posted a photo at a Michelin star luxury restaurant in the city, Daniel told me the project team was working late. The day she posted a photo at an exclusive omakase sushi spot, Daniel told me he had a client dinner. The day she posted a photo with dolphins at the city aquarium, Daniel again told me he had to work late. Even the famous artisanal cronuts he proudly brought home to me were from a trendy bakery she had also tagged herself at. There was no direct evidence in the photos that Daniel was with her, but I knew that was no excuse to kid myself. I took screenshots of those posts and silently returned the phone to its place. Sitting by the window, my hands and feet were already freezing. I curled up in a corner. Tears fell silently down my cheeks. My mind was a chaotic mess. I only felt a cold that pierced me to the bone. Daniel and I had known each other for 11 years, 7 dating and 4 married. I thought we would be together forever. We had promised each other never to lose our way, but now I realized that maybe I had gotten my hopes up too soon. In that moment, I hated that I had ever met him. We met freshman year in a dining hall at Cornell. I went to grab lunch that day, and at the buffet line, I saw a handsome guy serving food to his peers. Even with a hairnet and uniform, his attractiveness was undeniable. He furrowed his well-defined brows as he stared intently at the ladle in his hand. As I got closer, I heard the cafeteria cook next to him scolding him. "Kid, don't put so much meat in the chili. You have to stir it a bit." Okay, stop serving." The student who received the massive portion thanked Daniel with wide eyes. "Thanks, man." The situation left Daniel looking even more bewildered. I stood there thinking it was funny and joined that exact line. I watched as he clumsily tried to stir the pot without knowing how. Beside him, the cook just sighed. That afternoon, we ran into each other again in the library. We approached from opposite directions and reached for the exact same book at the same time. We looked at each other in surprise. This time, he wasn't wearing a uniform. His features were sharp and defined. Only one word crossed my mind: gorgeous. Time seemed to stand still. While I was captivated, he yielded the book to me, grabbed another one, and walked away without a word. I felt a little offended. After all, I was a pretty and outgoing girl too, so I decided to go to the dining hall that night to blow off steam by watching him make a fool of himself. But less than 2 hours later, we ran into each other again at a student union debate club meeting. We were both new freshman members. That was when I learned his name was Daniel. At the end of the meeting, seeing him leave in a hurry, I had an idea. I chased after him. Daniel turned to look at me. Backlit by the campus lights, that instant seemed to pierce my heart. "What is it?" His voice was calm and pleasant. I stepped closer and looked at him with a smile. My eyes were full of light. "Daniel, we've crossed paths 3 times today. Have you heard that 1 meeting is a coincidence, but 3 is destiny?" Hearing me, he smiled slightly. His gaze was gentle, but his words were not. "First time I'm hearing it. Look, Victoria, I'm late for my shift. Bye." And he hurried off. Jerk, I thought. I've run into a brick wall. But that night, I still went to eat at the dining hall where he worked. He, without his previous clumsiness, smiled as he served me and secretly gave me an extra piece of chicken. We naturally grew closer and started getting to know each other. The day we made our relationship official was also a very normal day. After a club meeting, as we gathered our materials together, he walked me back to my dorm. Outside the building, he pulled a gift out of his backpack, a bracelet with a star charm. His gaze was no longer playful, but full of tension. "Victoria, will you be my girlfriend?" I had never seen him so nervous. His voice trembled, and when he finished, he bit his lip. I smiled and nodded emphatically. Yes. I accepted the bracelet and let him put it on me. It took him a long time to clasp it. His hands were still shaking. That night, we hugged for a long time. When I got back to my room, I rolled around on my bed in joy. After 3 months of effort, I had finally won him over. We spent a sweet college life supporting each other, making promises, and trusting one another. We overcame the hurdle of graduation and the hardships of starting a business. At our wedding, we promised each other a lifetime together, becoming the couple everyone envied. Over the years, we watched each other grow into exceptional people in our respective fields. And he, with my help, became a tender, attentive, mature, stable man in perfect shape. But now he was destined to be the prize of someone else. That night, I looked at that girl's selfie over and over again. I had to admit she was very pretty. If she could volunteer at the Cornell Alumni Weekend and interview an outstanding graduate, she was undoubtedly a bright person. I tried to convince myself to think that maybe it wasn't as bad as I imagined. We had promised to be there for each other forever. We had promised to trust each other. Unfortunately, self-hypnosis failed. I have always been a goal-oriented and determined person. Without realizing it, the sun was coming up. My body regained its warmth. I didn't want Daniel to see me in a pathetic state. I got ready and left the house early. When Daniel called me, I was already at my office. His sleep-laced voice was seductive. "Honey, where are you? I had some things to catch up on, so I came to the office early. I left in such a rush I didn't want to wake you." At that moment, I had to feign calm so he wouldn't notice anything wrong. "Okay, make sure you eat breakfast. I love you." "Love you too, honey." We were used to saying I love you over the phone, sharing everything, seeing each other the moment we opened our eyes. Why did everything start to go wrong? I buried my head in my hands. My fingers unconsciously pulled at my hair. I sighed in pain, trying to calm down. Then I sent that girl's photo to a contact to have her investigated. Life went on. Daniel's behavior from that night didn't repeat itself, but I didn't feel at ease at all. It wasn't until I saw the background check on her that the stone in my heart finally caused ripples. The private investigator was very diligent. The information on the girl was highly detailed. Haley Carter, from a nearby upstate town. Her parents were teachers at a well-regarded public high school. From a young age, she had been a straight-A student. She was currently a junior majoring in computer science at Cornell. She was Daniel's direct successor in his major. My intuition was right. The report included photos of Daniel and her together at a famous restaurant, a sushi spot, and in a coffee shop downstairs from Daniel's startup office. There was no physical contact in the photos, but strangely, they looked like they fit perfectly together. Suddenly, I wanted to meet this girl. Just a few days prior, my master's thesis advisor had invited me to give a guest lecture and do an interview for the students. On the day of the lecture, the professor and the department dean accompanied me. I shared some practical finance and tech investment case studies with the students, and the response was overwhelmingly positive. After the talk, the professor arranged a special interview with the university paper. That was when I mentioned casually Daniel told me the journalist who interviewed him last time was a fantastic writer. So the professor specifically called in Haley Carter. She had attended my lecture from beginning to end. When the professor started recounting anecdotes from our sweet college days with Daniel, her face visibly tensed. I smiled, greeted her, and deliberately added, "Haley, I saw the article you wrote about my husband. Very well written. I'm looking forward to this interview as well." The girl gripped her tote bag tightly, and her eyes no longer sparkled like they did in her photos. After the awkward interview, I went to lunch with the professor and some students. Haley was there too. I don't know why she didn't excuse herself. During the meal under my guidance, the professor repeatedly brought up stories from our college days with Daniel, how we led the debate club together and won the national championship, how Daniel used to sneak into my classes just to be with me. I watched as Haley's face grew paler and paler, and suddenly I felt that torturing a kid like her was no fun at all. That night when I got home, Daniel was waiting for me on the couch. He had his phone in his hand, and the moment I walked in, he jumped up. "How was the university today? Why didn't you tell me you had an interview with the campus paper?" It seemed the girl had ratted me out. I feigned ignorance and looked at him. My thesis advisor thought the lecture went well and set it up for me. "But how did you find out?" His smile froze for a split second. Then he replied naturally. "The journalist who interviewed you is the same one who interviewed me. She added me on LinkedIn and texted when she did my piece. After yours, she texted to tell me we make an amazing couple. That girl has a good eye." I smiled, looked at him, and dropped a hint. Well, she didn't add me. It seems that, to her, my status and the great Daniel's are different. Hearing my words, his arms, which were wrapped around me, visibly tensed. A moment later, he squeezed me tighter and rocked me. "Honey, are you jealous? I love it when you get jealous. But I'm sure she only added me because I'm an alum from her specific major. You have to trust me." As he spoke, he rested his head on my neck and shoulder. His intention was clear, but inside I just wanted to rip the Band-Aid off and ask him why he had betrayed me. However, reason held me back. At that moment, aside from a few blurry photos, I had no hard proof. For 11 years, we had been so happy and he had been so good to me. My parents loved him more than they loved me. My friends trusted him. No one in my circle would ever think he was a bad guy or capable of cheating. If I made a scene now, the only one who would suffer was me. The anger in my heart was like a wild Mustang ready to explode out of control but finding no exit. I wanted to slap the smile right off his face, but in the end, I just said I was exhausted and retreated to the bathroom. That night, I woke up in the middle of the night again, seeing the man sleeping next to me. I felt the urge to stab him. Silently, I went back to his phone. I opened Haley's profile. It was still an empty text thread. He was either excessively cautious or overly confident that I would never check his phone. Her latest Instagram post was from that very night. A happy selfie with the caption, "You comforted me. I'm better now." The previous post was from the afternoon right after my interview. Just one line. So sad. I guessed it was Daniel who comforted the girl. Did they do it over a call or text? What did they say to each other? My head ached. My heart ached. The pain made my hand shake as I held the phone. I sat there dazed until dawn, but he noticed nothing. The next day, I received the draft of the interview from the girl via email. It wasn't bad at all. I replied with an approved. Yesterday, neither of us mentioned the networking texting issue. The girl played it pretty cool too, but the private investigator had already provided me with a burner account that Haley had accepted as a follower. Every day, like a stalker, I checked Haley's Instagram. I hated my own behavior. Gradually, I became numb and indifferent as if nothing was happening. A day before her Instagram updated. Can't wait to go to Six Flags tomorrow. The next day, like a creep, I followed them. Daniel had taken off the suit he wore to work and put on a hoodie that matched the girls. From a few yards away, I watched them hold hands, laugh, and talk happily. The girl was very flirtatious. She shook Daniel's arm, looked at him sweetly, and said something I couldn't hear, probably begging him to go on the roller coaster with her. I thought Daniel would refuse. 8 years ago, when we went to a theme park together, I forced him onto one and he threw up violently. After that, he swore he would never ride one again. But I was wrong. He smiled, stroked her hair, and got in line with her. I watched the roller coaster zoom past. I heard the screams, over and over again. I warned myself that I had to get my revenge on them. After the roller coaster, Daniel was pale, and his lips had lost all their color, but he still tenderly comforted the guilty-looking girl. I followed them and watched them put on Bugs Bunny ears. I watched Daniel delicately wipe a smudge of funnel cake whipped cream from the corner of Haley's lips. I watched them walk forward, holding hands. Finally, at some point, or perhaps when my disappointment reached a certain critical mass, I stopped, unable to keep going. I stood there, letting the tourists passing by look at me or bump into me. It wasn't until a little girl, maybe 4 or 5 years old, walked up to me with a tissue that I snapped out of it. "Lady, don't cry." I looked down at her through my blurry vision. I realized that tears were completely soaking my face. I took the tissue and thanked her with a smile that was probably uglier than a frown. The little girl scolded me seriously. "Lady, you're really pretty, but if you cry, you get ugly." It's true. I am so pretty. Daniel, that bastard, threw his conscience overboard. I no longer wanted to know why he cheated, why he broke his vows. I just wanted to be free. Life is long. It's only been 11 years. I just turned 30. My life hasn't even reached the halfway point. I turned around and left. He didn't need me anymore, but he was going to pay the price. Upon returning home, I gradually regained my calm. From the night I realized something was wrong, until now, 15 days had passed. Thanks to exposure therapy constantly forcing myself to watch their interactions, a disappointment massive enough was able to counteract the sweetness and happiness of the past. I took an inventory of all the household assets, real estate, and investments. Since I studied finance, I managed all the family's wealth. For half a year, I planned how to legally drive this household into ruin. The hard part was Daniel's company. He started his tech startup, TechGen, when he was getting his master's, and after 7 years and several rounds of funding, it was in the crucial stage of preparing for its IPO. Yes, at such a pivotal stage, he gave no thought to the consequences and let himself be carried away by other urges. You could see what place that girl held in his heart. I didn't know if he had considered the fallout and chosen Haley, or if he thought I would just accept her existence and either quietly divorce him or not make a scene. Night fell and he came back. He had changed out of his theme park clothes and was back in the suit he wore to work that morning. How could he switch roles so flawlessly? He saw me sitting on the couch, walked over and hugged me. Strangely, he didn't smell like anything different, but I still felt nauseous. He held me in his arms and complained about how exhausting work was. Where he couldn't see, my eyes were filled with pure hatred. How could he treat me like a fool and trick me into never suspecting a thing I shared? What I had done that day, as usual, and casually mentioned an investment opportunity a former colleague had recommended. He smiled and told me to make the call. He trusted me. Slowly. I transferred our liquid assets and took out home equity lines of credit on our properties under the guise of aggressive investments. He didn't notice a thing. The day I saw a photo of him and Haley kissing on the street, I hired someone to bribe a few people in Haley's social circle. I ordered them to tempt her into buying luxury goods, frequenting ostentatious places, expanding her vision of fame and fortune, and feeding her desires and ambitions. I watched her become increasingly materialistic, as Daniel spent money on her. I was elevating her just to wait for the day of her crushing fall. The day I watched them walk in and out of a boutique hotel, I finished converting all our marital assets into massive debts, leaving us essentially bankrupt. By the time Daniel was strapped for pocket money, provided he didn't touch the company's funds, I used a trick to have Haley seduce him into buying her a luxury condo. I squeezed Daniel's personal cash flow to force him to dip into TechGen's corporate accounts. After seeing photos of them coming and going from their new love nest, I plan to have him ousted from his own company right at the moment of the final pre-IPO funding round. The feeling of having the child he had raised for 7 years snatched away would undoubtedly be excruciating. I did all this in total silence without telling a soul. He and I continued playing the roles of a deeply in love couple, fulfilling our vows of trust, sharing, and romance. I was a phenomenal actress. Until now. The moment of detonation was near. Only I know how brutal this last half year has been. In the morning, Daniel left in his white button-down and jeans. Probably by noon, he would be served with the divorce papers along with the notification of a preliminary asset freeze. Haley would also receive notice of a civil lawsuit demanding the return of marital assets. Unfortunately, even with my deliberate maneuvering and the property appraisals, the recoverable amount barely reached $1 million. After Daniel left, I went upstairs and packed all his things. I had endured for half a year. I could finally kick him out of my house. When Daniel returned, all his suitcases were piled outside the front door. I had changed the keypad code and wiped his fingerprint from the smart lock. He rang the doorbell impatiently. Through the security camera, I watched as after ringing the bell, he clenched his fist and then released it in helpless frustration. The good mood from the morning had vanished, leaving only sheer panic. I watched him in silence as he paced, restless. Since I wasn't opening the door, he took out his phone. Soon my cell rang. I let it ring for a while before answering. Victoria, open the door, please. We need to talk about this properly. His voice sounded frustrated and pleading. I have nothing to talk to you about. Handle it through your lawyer. Silence fell on the other end of the line. Through the camera, I saw him lean against the door, completely defeated. Despite everything, it hurt me to see the man I had loved for 11 years like this. I was with him from adolescence into adulthood. From clumsiness to confidence. I'm not getting a divorce. His voice was deep and heavy. See you in court, Daniel. I hung up the phone. On the camera, I saw him stare at his phone in silence. He just sat down right there. On the other side of the door, I lay on the bed in our master bedroom. But it was another sleepless night. He sat in front of the door all night long. What was he thinking about? Regret, guilt, or anger toward me? I opened the door reluctantly the next morning. Seeing me, he stood up with difficulty. His expression was one of agony. Daniel, we have nothing left to discuss. You and Haley have been served. I've sued her to recover the marital funds you spent, and I've filed for divorce. My lawyer will handle everything. He stepped forward and grabbed my hand. Victoria, please, let's talk. We stood there face to face for a long time, so close, yet so far apart. Victoria, we've loved each other for 11 years. Please, let's talk. Yes. He knew I had always been soft-hearted. 11 years. So what? You betrayed me. What else is there to say? You know perfectly well I would never forgive you. I spoke with heavy sarcasm, but my words still held a trace of attachment. Victoria. He kept looking at me with pain. The face I once fell in love with was now ashen and dull. I stepped aside, signaling him to come in. He sat on the sofa with his head bowed, not daring to look at me. Victoria, I love you. I have never once thought about divorcing you. Can you believe me? I scoffed and said nothing, letting him dig his own grave. I know you can't accept this. You won't forgive me this time. Yesterday, when I was served, the first thing I thought about was how much you must have suffered when you found out. How long have you known? How long have you been hurting Victoria? I love you. I still love you. Can you still believe me? He looked up at me with desperate expectation. I honestly found it laughable. Believe you. How could I dare? Don't tarnish the word love. He himself seemed to find it ironic and smiled bitterly. We've loved each other for 11 years. I always believed we would be together forever, living a quiet but happy life. Haley's appearance was like a fresh fish in a calm aquarium. It stirred the waters of my heart. She looked at me with pure worship. She said I was her idol. She gave me a sense of veneration and validation that I never felt with you. So, I gradually got greedy. I told her I had a wife and would never get a divorce, but she threw herself into the fire anyway. She said she only needed me to give her time. You know, over the years, I've turned down a lot of women. Guys laughed at me. They called me whipped, but I didn't care. Hanaga ever. After rejecting her, Haley's crying stayed in my mind. I realized I couldn't reject her anymore. I won't deny that I like her. I'm just so greedy, aren't I? I can't let go of either of you. Haley won't affect you. She'll be very discreet. Victoria, can we please not get a divorce? Listening to his absolute garbage, I truly didn't know how to react. On what planet did he think I would ever accept his filthy proposal? What did it matter if the girl was discreet? I genuinely wanted to crack his skull open to see what was inside. Had his brain turned to mush over the years? It seems time is no guarantee that you truly know a person. Daniel suddenly. I don't recognize you. Maybe I could never understand a man like you. Don't make excuses for your infidelity. I'm listening to you because you wanted to talk, not to hear this absolute bullshit. I cut him off ice cold. As for the money you blew on Haley, I've had it tracked down. The condo will be seized and the rest, nearly $200,000 in cash, will be clawed back too. Don't even dream of paying it back before the divorce. I won't let you touch a single cent. Our current net worth is entirely debt, and debts are shared. The shares of the company in your name will also transfer. I am entitled to my share of your equity. Debt. The cash flow in our house has always been incredibly strong. How can we be bankrupt? Talking about money finally snapped him out of his self-pitying monologue. Failed investments. Everything is legally verifiable. My lawyer will provide a detailed ledger during discovery. He suddenly smiled with sheer disdain. You planned this a long time ago. How rational and selfish of you. Seeing the sarcasm in his eyes and hearing his judgment, the rage inside me could no longer be contained. Yes, I am selfish. Daniel, for 11 years, I have been entirely faithful to you. I haven't betrayed this family in the slightest. It was you. You destroyed everything I worked so hard to build. You want to know? The photo of you two at the Cornell alumni weekend, the profile picture she took of you, the way you dressed like a frat boy just to match her, the photos of you kissing, walking in and out of hotels, holding hands. I even followed you to Six Flags and watched you two together, crying my eyes out just a few yards away. You know what? You're an animal. I never imagined we'd end up like this. I hold grudges, Daniel. Listen to me very clearly. I will not let either of you live in peace. Get out! Like a madwoman, I grabbed a stunned Daniel and shoved him out the front door before he could even react. Then, I leaned against the door, drained of all strength, and burst into tears, venting all my pent-up fury. On the other side of the door, I heard him say softly, I'm sorry, but what good was that now? My lawyer proceeded exactly according to plan. First, we settled the lawsuit against Haley. After submitting a dossier of evidence regarding her receipt of stolen marital funds and the ensuing scandal to the Cornell University administration, I waited for their disciplinary action. After all, Daniel and I weren't nobodies. In the tech and venture capital circles, all sorts of rumors were flying around about our messy divorce. TechGen's funding round stalled out, and Haley's ruined reputation made it impossible for her to set foot in the tech industry or maintain her standing on campus. When I got a call from my parents, I felt fear for the first time since I started planning the divorce. My parents absolutely adored him. They remembered his favorite foods, even his little quirks. Whenever we went back to their house in the suburbs, the table was covered with his favorite dishes. They told everyone they met, our son-in-law is a sweetheart. He treats Victoria so well, he's such a family man. Now that things had reached this point, I dreaded facing their disappointment. Mom, when I answered, I didn't know what to say. Victoria, have you eaten dinner? Yes, I ate. What about you and Dad? We did too. No matter what happens, you have to take care of yourself. Do you want us to come see you? My mother's voice wasn't as cheerful as usual. She didn't ask me why I was getting divorced, nor did she advise me to reconcile. With that simple sentence, my eyes welled up again. I'm sorry, Mom. I've disappointed you both. I didn't manage my marriage well. Dad and you loved him so much. I've embarrassed you in front of the relatives and the neighbors. Don't say that, sweetie. He's the bastard. You dump a bastard, period. It's not a big deal. We only loved that boy because he treated you well. If he's no good to you anymore, why should we give a damn about him, and who cares about embarrassment? Nothing is more important than our daughter. Victoria, Dad's right here. Don't be afraid. Do what you have to do. My father's firm words made me feel relieved for the first time in half a year. Since I was little, I was always the good daughter, the model student who never let her parents down. With this divorce, what I feared most was their disappointment. Worried that I'd have a hard time alone, my parents drove down to take care of me. It made me laugh, and it comforted me. Later, I found out that Daniel and his parents had contacted mine multiple times to convince them not to make a scene, but my parents shut them all down. They firmly supported and protected me. The legal process went incredibly smoothly. Haley was ordered to return the cash value of the assets within the time frame stipulated by the court. Cornell University, after receiving the evidence of her involvement in embezzling funds and the massive public fallout, forced Haley, a once promising student, to withdraw. Ruined. The day after the court ruling, Haley wanted to see me. The girl who had never made a scene in front of me, who had never revealed her relationship with Daniel through any public channel. I was curious to know how it had come to this. When we met again, she no longer had that vibrant look. What I saw was a face full of anger and sheer resentment. Looking at her, I only felt pity. "Are you happy now I've been kicked out of school? I worked so hard to get into Cornell, and you ruined everything." "You ruined it yourself," I said calmly. "Well, just so you know, I love him and he loves me." "So what if the university kicks me out?" "Daniel said he'd find a way, that he'd take care of me. 11 years together." "So what?" "He said he was happy with me. You know, before I was willing to just stay by his side quietly. I didn't care if he never divorced you. But since you decided to end it, I guess I should thank you." I stared at the furious woman in front of me and was left speechless. I used to think she was smart, but now she just seemed like a complete idiot, blinded by love or anger. Why was she coming to provoke me? "So you were happy to just play the side piece." My words left her speechless, her face flushing bright red. It seemed she had nothing else to say. "We haven't finalized the divorce yet. Legally, I am still his wife, which means you are still the mistress." I stood up and left. I didn't want to listen to her delusions anymore. As I turned around, I put a plan in motion to plaster flyers around her old hometown. The next day, right below her family's house, and at the front gates of the high school, where her parents taught, there were flyers that read, "The Carter family teaches your students, but lets their daughter seduce married men and aspire to be a gold-digging mistress." I heard that Haley's father lost all his standing at the high school, and when he got home, he was so angry he had a heart attack and was hospitalized. Haley had to rush back to face her parents' crushing disappointment and reprimands, along with the harsh judgment of relatives and neighbors. On the internet, the backlash and insults spread like wildfire, and my highly competent lawyer finally repossessed the luxury condo and the drained cash. Since I had filed an injunction to freeze Daniel's assets, he couldn't help her at all. In the end, Haley had to sell all her designer bags and borrow more money, just to scrape together a portion of what she owed. And Daniel had to take out massive, high-interest personal loans to cover the rest. Of course, I kept a record of those loans as proof of his debt post-divorce. While Haley's life was a complete disaster zone, Daniel's was even worse. Because of our messy divorce, TechGen's funding remained completely frozen. He refused to sign the divorce papers because of the family debts, but he couldn't prove that I had intentionally transferred the assets to ruin him. The divorce dragged on, and both of them grew increasingly anxious. They were no longer a source of joy for one another. Haley complained constantly that he didn't care about her, that he hadn't kept his promise to fix her academic suspension, and that he hadn't even visited her father when he was in the hospital. Now her future was destroyed. Her reputation was in the gutter. She was disowned by her parents and cyberbullied online. Daniel no longer found freshness or happiness by her side. She had become a massive burden. Finally, under the unsustainable pressure of the startup's crashing finances, Daniel accepted the marital debts and my divorce terms. The only condition he demanded was that the company's shares could only be sold to him. And so he walked away from the marriage hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt. He thought he had saved his company, but through my venture capital network, I intervened in TechGen's final funding round. I allied with the board and other major shareholders and orchestrated his complete ousting from the company. As soon as the funding closed, he was fired. The day he left the startup, I went to see him on purpose. I watched him walk out of his office, carrying a cardboard box, wearing a devastated expression, walking away from the workspace, walking away from the empire he had built. My heart didn't feel as relieved as I thought it would. The day TechGen IPO'd on the NASDAQ and rang the opening bell, no one remembered the founder Daniel. And if anyone did remember, they didn't bring him up. He was probably sitting in some unnoticed corner, watching with profound grief as the child he worked so hard to raise drifted further and further away. When everything was finalized, I took a long vacation. I went to Africa, a safari in the Serengeti we had always planned but never took. Seeing the local children, impoverished but full of hope, and feeling the sheer magnificence of the Great Migration while standing in the vast ancient savanna. I completely let go of the last 11 years. Good or bad, it was all in the past now. I heard news about Daniel again 2 years later at a tech investor forum. I was told he had tried to launch another startup, but this time it wasn't going well. His products weren't competitive. The seed money evaporated, and he went into debt all over again. I saw Daniel in person at a venture capital mixer. He was desperately seeking angel investors. I was attending as a VIP partner. He was still wearing the custom suit I had bought for him years ago, clinking glasses with investors, but it didn't fit him anymore. His frame had thinned out, failing to fill the shoulders, giving him a disheveled, hollow look. I sat at another table, surrounded by founders vying for my attention, treated with utmost deference, watching him from afar like a total stranger. I saw him press a hand to his stomach. His ulcer must have come back. Early in his career, he wrecked his stomach, binge drinking at networking events. Later, when the company grew and he didn't have to drink out of obligation, and thanks to my strict dietary care, he got much better. Now that stomach I had carefully nursed back to health was a pitiful mess again. At the end of the event, I was sitting in my black Range Rover. I saw a thin, pale, and plainly dressed Haley helping Daniel into a yellow taxi. Should I consider this a wish fulfilled? After my vacation, I had received a few updates on them. I was told Haley's parents took early retirement out of absolute shame and moved out of state. Haley couldn't transfer her credits to finish her degree, but she stayed by Daniel's side and tried to help him build his new company. Later, when industry friends asked if I wanted to keep blackballing them, I declined. With the permanent stain of having embezzled corporate funds to spend on his mistress and the ruthless, fast-paced nature of the tech industry, Daniel would never have another chance to rise again. He was destined to walk a path of poverty alongside Haley. Let's get out of here. A hand reached over from the side and squeezed mine. What are you looking at so intensely? He asked with a smile. I turned to see the man in the passenger seat. I squeezed his hand back, intertwining our fingers. My face was glowing with happiness. Seeing me look at him, the man smiled radiantly. Daniel wasn't wrong. Young people really are refreshing and stimulating. Daniel blinked and saw Victoria surrounded by an elite crowd. She was wearing a high-end designer suit and with elegant gestures handled herself effortlessly among tycoons, discussing venture capital projects worth tens of millions of dollars. That was a world he could no longer access. It had been 2 years. The last time he saw her was when his old company rang the bell on the NASDAQ. He could only watch in silence from the crowd. Now seeing her again, he looked down at his own suit, which no longer fit right. It was still the exact same style from 3 years ago. He smiled bitterly and looked away. With no time for further reflection, he rushed to find anyone to invest in his new company. 2 years ago, the night before TechGen went public, he was forced out. He tried again and founded his current startup, Novatech. Unfortunately, the company lacked capital and innovative products, so making any headway was nearly impossible. Without a cash injection, it wouldn't last another month. The small-time investors he wouldn't have even glanced at 3 years ago were now his only hope. For an investment of a few $100,000, he toasted drink after drink. Mr. Daniel, if this were the old TechGen, not just 200,000. If I offered you 100,000, you would have welcomed me with open arms. But the Novatech of today, Mr. Lopez, just like I built TechGen, I can build Novatech. If you invest now, I guarantee you'll see a massive ROI. This Mr. Lopez was the only one even giving him the time of day, but before Daniel could finish his pitch, the man shook his head and walked away. Daniel, right now, everyone in VC sees Novatech as a sinking ship. You should really think about an exit strategy. Another investor patted his shoulder, offering genuine but useless advice. Daniel nodded gratefully. He knew the situation, but he couldn't just give up. The mixer was wrapping up. He was going to leave empty-handed again. He repeated this brutal cycle of attending events and begging for cash. The ulcer that Victoria used to manage had flared up again, and the pain was agonizing. He clutched his stomach and headed for the restroom. Just as he reached the door, he heard a conversation inside. Poor Daniel, man. Seriously, ever since he got booted from TechGen, he hasn't caught a single break. Novatech's tech is garbage, and his reputation in the valley is toxic. Who's going to fund him? He brought it on himself. Having a powerhouse wife like Victoria, and he actually has the nerve to cheat on her. The only reason he's even allowed in these rooms is because people pity him. Well, what successful guy doesn't face temptations? But most know how to handle their business. He just forgot his place. Haha, sounds like you speak from experience, Dave. The conversation in the restroom shifted to other topics, but Daniel was already used to the gossip. A few men walked out, and seeing Daniel's pale face, they knew he had heard them. 3 years ago, they would have scrambled to apologize, but now they just smirked and walked right past him. Daniel returned to the ballroom. Almost everyone was gone. Still clutching his burning stomach, he went down to the lobby. Haley, who had been waiting for him, rushed over as soon as she saw him step out of the elevator. Did you get the funding? No, not yet. Then the company is going bankrupt, and we have zero money at home. Why did you let Victoria play you and get you kicked out of your own company? It was about to IPO. We wouldn't be living like rats right now. Haley didn't notice Daniel's physical pain and just kept complaining. 2 years of free falling from the top had completely shattered her fantasy of him as a flawless idol. Haley, my stomach is killing me. When he first founded TechGen, he also had to attend endless networking events. But back then, Victoria always went with him. She prepped his antacids, made sure he ate, and later, when the company stabilized, she found him a top gastroenterologist and personally cooked him healing broths. Your stomach is an old issue. Just pop an Advil and you'll be fine. Haley only knew how to tell him to take painkillers. The worship of the past had curdled into sheer apathy. They got into a cab. Daniel's car had been sold months ago to make payroll. As he got in, he saw Victoria in the sleek black Range Rover in the next lane. Beside her was a new man. She was looking at him with the exact same sparkle in her eyes that she used to reserve for Daniel. He didn't know if it was jealousy from the scene he had just witnessed, the stale smell of the cab, or his rotting stomach, but a violent wave of nausea hit him. Seeing that Daniel was about to throw up, the cab driver yelled, "Hey, don't puke in my car, you throw up, I'm charging you a $300 cleaning fee." Haley quickly yanked a plastic grocery bag out of her tote and shoved it at him. Daniel looked at the bag, frowned, and then saw the look of utter disgust on Haley's face. He swallowed the bile, turned his head toward the window, and gripped the plastic bag until his knuckles turned white. The driver kept muttering, thought everyone coming out of this hotel was some rich CEO. Outside it was raining. Drops hit the window steadily. Beside him, Haley wouldn't stop whining. In 2 years, the company is buried in debt. I thought you were going to build a second TechGen, but it's nothing, just debt. If we had invested that money in an index fund or bought a house, we wouldn't be flat broke. Because of you, I couldn't finish my degree. I've suffered so much, and I have absolutely nothing to show for it. I haven't bought new clothes in 2 years. I have to count pennies for groceries, and I'm only in my 20s. The physical sickness and the slight dizziness made the cramped space feel suffocating. Isn't this the path you chose yourself? Weren't you the one who came looking for me? Have you forgotten? It wasn't the first time he had heard these exact complaints. Before, Daniel had always endured it in silence, but tonight he refused to carry the weight alone. He lowered his voice, trembling with anger. He looked at Haley with a tone dripping in venom and spite, and she physically flinched. After a moment, Daniel looked away and stared out the window. How had it come to this? He clenched his right fist and slammed it into the seat next to him. He couldn't shake the crushing frustration. He and Victoria had been together for 11 years. From the moment he saw her in college, that woman who had witnessed all his awkwardness had firmly planted herself in his heart. Her confidence and vitality commanded all his attention, but deep down, there was a slight inferiority complex that he never even admitted to himself. That's why, even though he liked her, he waited for her to make the first move, and only after confirming she was entirely devoted to him did he confess his feelings. Victoria was brilliant and came from a solid upper-middle-class family. She gave a small-town guy like Daniel so many firsts. She taught him the ropes, introduced him to high society, and organized his entire life immaculately so he could push forward without a single distraction. Finally, TechGen succeeded, but he grew arrogant. Haley appeared at the absolute peak of his success. The worship in her eyes, the desperate dependence of a younger woman, was something Victoria had never given him, and it temporarily fed his fragile male ego. He never intended to get a divorce, but he couldn't resist that pure, untainted look of adoration. He thought that with Victoria holding down the fort at home, he could seek out Haley whenever he needed an ego boost, entirely forgetting that Victoria was not the type of woman to let herself be stepped on. The facts proved that it wasn't Victoria who couldn't leave Daniel, but rather Daniel who was absolutely nothing without Victoria. At first, when he was booted from TechGen, Victoria hadn't utterly destroyed him. The cash from the forced buyout of his shares was enough for him to live a perfectly normal, comfortable life, provided he budgeted. But his bruised ego and the prodding from Haley, who had gotten a taste of the luxury lifestyle, pushed him to launch a new startup. Unfortunately, in this new venture, he didn't have the fresh ideas, the industry contacts, or the operational backbone he once had. Furthermore, carrying the permanent stigma of infidelity and corporate embezzlement, in an industry that changed at lightning speed, he simply couldn't bounce back. They arrived at their apartment exhausted. Opening the door, they were greeted by absolute chaos. Haley had never been good at household chores. Before, Daniel thought she was just young and would learn over time, but today he felt a profound, exhausting helplessness. He walked past the pile of junk food wrappers on the coffee table, ignored the mountain of clean and dirty laundry mixed together on the sofa, and dragged his feet to the bedroom. He collapsed onto the bed and stared blankly at the ceiling. Haley approached cautiously. The Daniel from the taxi had genuinely terrified her. "Honey, does your stomach still hurt? Do you want an Advil? By the way, did you pick up the results from your last lab work?" The stomach pain was impossible to ignore now. The last time, because he was frantically trying to secure funding, he had forgotten to go to the clinic. I forgot. I should have gone. I've just been so busy lately with work in the house." Daniel closed his eyes and tuned Haley out. Terminal stomach cancer. Daniel looked at the lab results in his hand without an ounce of surprise. He felt a strange sort of calm, as if the dust had finally settled. The oncologist kept talking, but his mind was a million miles away. Maybe this was his ultimate punishment. He sat on a bench in the hospital lobby watching people walk by, thinking about the startup's suffocating debt and where he was going to get the money to literally save his own life. An intense, desperate will to live washed over him. Suddenly, he remembered something. Thank God for the premium life and critical illness insurance policy Victoria had forced him to get. He remembered how he had actively fought against her buying such an expensive policy that cost tens of thousands of dollars a year. Now it was his literal lifeline. He had no strength left to run the company. He had to liquidate Novatech before it was too late. He wouldn't be able to pay off all the creditors, but he had to cut his losses right now. Daniel planned everything step by step. This time, he was entirely grounded in reality. Haley didn't find out about the fire sale of the company until after the papers were signed. She had always dreamed of living the life of a rich tech wife. The delusion of returning to that opulent material life was the only thing that had kept her tied to Daniel for 2 years. When that dream officially shattered, she lost her mind completely. "Daniel, you bastard. You promised me a rich life and you sell the company behind my back. What am I supposed to do now? I've suffered so much with you. Are you even a man? You've ruined my entire life." Daniel looked at the screaming, hysterical woman in front of him. He felt nothing but bottomless regret. "I have terminal stomach cancer." That single sentence abruptly stopped Haley's screaming. "I've mapped it all out. The company couldn't survive, so I had to cut the bleeding. Even with the sale, we'll still have debts, but with the equity from this apartment and the payout from my old critical illness insurance policy, we can cover almost all of it. My medical treatments are also covered by that policy. So if we crunch the numbers and get normal jobs, we can survive. Sell the apartment, I refuse. Find the insurance binder you gave me before. I need to run the numbers." Daniel looked at Haley and continued. "I bought this apartment before we got married, so I make the call on whether it gets sold. But the debts were accrued after we were legally bound, so you have absolutely no choice but to accept it. Either that or you walk away with half of a mountain of debt." Haley froze. She was clearly in shock. Daniel waited, giving her time to process it. Insurance. What insurance? After a long pause, Haley finally reacted. She had no choice but to cooperate. "The policy I told you to pay the premiums for every year. Victoria researched it for months. It was the absolute best plan for founders like us. It requires an annual premium, but right now, it is literally our only salvation." Seeing the utterly blank, terrified look in Haley's eyes, a sickening sense of dread washed over him. "Don't tell me you didn't pay it." Haley lowered her head. Her voice was trembling on the verge of sobs. I don't understand that financial stuff. I just thought paying tens of thousands of dollars a year was way too expensive. I seriously didn't know." In that exact moment, Daniel felt a despair so heavy, so absolute, that he didn't even have the energy to get angry or ask what she had blown the premium money on. Daniel wished with every fiber of his being that this was all just a nightmare, that he would wake up 3 years ago, cut Haley out of his life, and protect his home with Victoria. Unfortunately, there are no what-ifs in the real world. Every step you take, you have to face the consequences. Without the expensive experimental treatments, Daniel didn't last long. He passed away a year later. Before he died, Haley took care of him through gritted teeth, losing sleep day and night. Still, only in her 20s, her face had lost all its youthful glow, not out of deep devotion, but out of sheer terror, that if she didn't take care of Daniel, she would be left shouldering half of his crushing financial liabilities. Alone. Fortunately, Daniel did the math for her. He sold the apartment and liquidated what little personal assets he had left to pay off the vast majority of the creditors, leaving Haley with almost nothing. In the dead of night, in utter isolation, Haley would sit on the narrow bed in her cramped, cheap rental apartment. Sometimes she would think about the bright future she was supposed to have in the tech industry. Sometimes she would dream about being a wealthy, pampered wife married to Daniel. But the reality was that she had no home to return to and absolutely no one to lean on. The gig economy jobs she managed to land were unstable and sporadic. Her former classmates avoided her like the plague. In the supposed prime of her life, sometimes she would stare blankly at the wall like a madwoman, sometimes consumed by venomous resentment, and other times just completely empty and lost.